The galaxy was old. It had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 empires. It had watched stars die and new ones take their place. And in all that time, the beings who lived among the stars had learned one important truth. Some species were simply better than others. The Galactic Council had made this official. They had created a ranking system that placed every intelligent species into categories. Category 1 was the highest. These were the ancient races, the ones who had mastered space travel when most planets were still balls of molten rock. Category 9 was the lowest. These were the young species, the primitive ones. The creatures who had barely learned to leave their own worlds. Humans were Category 9. Princess Valora of the Aethel Empire had grown up knowing this. Her tutors had taught her about every species in the known universe. They had shown her images and data files. They had explained the strengths and weaknesses of each race. And when they came to humans, they had almost laughed. A curious species, her oldest tutor had said. They come from a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom. Their skin is soft. Their bones break easily. They cannot survive in extreme temperatures. They have no telepathy, no telekinesis, no special abilities of any kind. Valora had looked at the images of humans with mild interest. They looked so plain, so ordinary. 2 arms, 2 legs, flat faces, strange hair growing from their heads. They were not ugly. But they were not beautiful either. They were just unremarkable. Why are they even ranked? She had asked. They seem barely worth noticing. Her tutor had smiled. That is precisely the point, Your Highness. They are not worth noticing. The Council included them only because they managed to achieve basic space travel. But they will never amount to anything. Their lifespans are too short. They live for less than 100 years. Can you imagine? By the time they learn anything useful, they die. Valora was 312 years old. She would live for at least another 500. The idea of dying before reaching 100 seemed almost cruel. How could any species accomplish anything meaningful in such a short time? So she had dismissed humans from her mind. They were a footnote in her education. Nothing more. She had more important things to think about. She was the crown princess of the Aethel Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. She had duties, responsibilities, and a future throne waiting for her. She also had Lord Kalos. Kalos was a high commander in the Imperial fleet. He was tall and handsome by Aethel standards, with silver skin and eyes that glowed like twin moons. He came from a noble family. He had won many battles, and he had made it very clear that he wished to marry Valora and become her emperor. Valora did not love him. She was not even sure she liked him. But marriages among royalty were not about love. They were about power, alliances, and the continuation of great bloodlines. Kalos was a suitable match. That was what mattered. On the day everything changed, Valora was traveling aboard her royal cruiser, the Starbound Crown. It was a magnificent ship, one of the finest in the Empire. It had golden hulls that gleamed in the light of passing stars. It had weapons powerful enough to destroy small moons. It had shields that could withstand almost any attack, but it could not withstand what happened next. They were passing through the rim sectors, a lawless region of space far from the civilized core worlds. Valora had not wanted to travel through such a dangerous area, but it was the fastest route to the diplomatic summit she was attending. Her advisors had assured her that the Starbound Crown was more than capable of handling any threats. They were wrong. The explosion came without warning. One moment, Valora was sitting in her private chambers, reading reports. The next moment, she was thrown across the room as the entire ship shook violently. Alarms began screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. The artificial gravity flickered, making her stomach lurch. "What is happening?" she demanded, picking herself up from the floor. Her personal guard, a stern warrior named Captain Soren, burst through the door. His silver face was pale with worry. "Your Highness, the main engine has suffered a catastrophic failure. We do not know the cause. It may have been sabotage. Or it may have been a malfunction. Either way, the engine core is going critical. We have fires spreading through the lower decks. Valora felt a chill run through her body. Can we contain it? The engineering teams are trying, but... Soren hesitated. Your Highness, I must be honest. It does not look good. We have sent out distress calls on all channels, but we are far from any Aethel outpost. It could be hours before help arrives. Hours. They might not have hours. Valora could smell smoke now, drifting through the ventilation system. She could hear distant shouts and the sound of running feet. Lord Kalos appeared in the doorway, his handsome face twisted with anger. This is unacceptable. Someone will answer for this incompetence. Assigning blame can wait, Valora said sharply. Right now, we need solutions. The ship shook again. More alarms joined the chorus. Through the viewport, Valora could see flames licking at the outer hull. The starborn crown was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. Then the communication officer's voice crackled through the intercom. Your Highness, we have received a response to our distress call. Hope surged through Valora's chest. From whom? Which Athel vessel? There was a pause. When the officer spoke again, his voice was strange, almost confused. It is not an Ethel vessel, Your Highness. It is a human ship. The room went silent. Valora stared at the intercom as if it had suddenly grown teeth. A human ship? Kalos laughed, but there was no humor in it. You must be joking. What could humans possibly do to help us? They say they are close, the officer continued. Less than 10 minutes away. They say they can attempt a rescue. Soren shook his head. Your Highness, human ships are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Even if they reach us, they cannot possibly dock with a burning vessel. It would be suicide. Then we wait for proper rescue. Kalos declared. We are Aethel. We do not accept help from Category 9 species. It would be humiliating. Another explosion rocked the ship. This time, the lights went out completely before the emergency power kicked in. When they came back on, they were dim and red. The smoke was thicker now. Valora could hear screaming from somewhere in the lower decks. She looked at Kalos, at Soren, at the fear hidden behind their proud faces. They would rather die than accept help from humans. Their pride was more important than their lives. But Valora was not just a princess. She was the future empress. And an empress had to make hard choices. Open a channel to the human ship, she commanded. Your Highness, Kalos protested. I said open it. The officer obeyed. Static filled the air for a moment, then cleared. And then Valora heard a voice unlike any she had heard before. It was calm, steady, and strangely warm. It spoke Galactic Common with a heavy accent, but the words were clear. This is Captain Kang Do-hyun of the freighter Dandelion. We received your distress call. Hold tight. We are coming. Valora did not know it yet, but her entire understanding of the universe was about to change. Because sometimes, the creatures the galaxy forgot about were the ones worth remembering. The Dandelion was not a pretty ship. It was small, battered, and covered in patches where repairs had been made over the years. Its paint was faded. Its engines made strange noises. Next to the burning elegance of the starborn crown, it looked like a child's toy. But inside that ugly little ship, two humans were preparing to do something impossible. Kang Do-hyun stood at the controls, his dark eyes fixed on the screens in front of him. He was 34 years old, with short black hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. Before becoming a freighter captain, he had served in the Republic of Korea Navy SEALs back on Earth. He had seen combat. He had been shot, stabbed, burned, and nearly drowned. He had watched friends die and enemies fall. Nothing in his past had prepared him for rescuing alien royalty from a burning starship. Do-hyun, are you seeing these readings? His co-pilot, Yoon Hana, was staring at her own screens with wide eyes. She was 29, with long black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had been an engineer before joining him on the Dandelion. She understood machines better than most people understood their own families. I see them, Do-hyun said quietly. The plasma fires are spreading to the upper decks. Their shield generators are failing. If we try to dock, we could get caught in the explosion when those engines finally blow. I know. We could die. I know. Hana looked at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and started preparing the docking systems. You know, a smart person would turn around and fly away right now, she said. Do-hyun almost smiled. Good thing we are not smart. They had answered the distress call without thinking. It was what humans did. When someone was in trouble, you helped them. It did not matter who they were or where they came from. It did not matter if they were Category 1 or Category 9. If they needed help, you gave it. The other species in the galaxy found this confusing. They had their hierarchies, their rankings, their careful calculations of who deserved assistance and who did not. Humans had something simpler. They called it compassion. The Dandelion approached the starborn crown carefully. Even from a distance, they could see how bad things were. Flames poured from cracks in the golden hull. Debris floated in space around the dying ship. Emergency pods were launching, but not enough. There were still too many people trapped inside. Their docking port is on fire, Hana reported. Find another way in. There is a cargo bay on the port side. It is not designed for docking, but I might be able to force our airlock to connect. It will be rough. Do it. The next few minutes were tense. Hana worked her magic with the controls, adjusting their approach angle, compensating for the heat and radiation pouring off the burning ship. The Dandelion shook and groaned as they got closer. Warning lights flashed. The computer kept telling them to turn back. They ignored it. When they finally connected with the cargo bay, the impact threw both of them against their seats. Metal screamed against metal. But when the dust settled, they had a seal. It was not perfect. Air was leaking. But it would hold long enough. Do-hyun stood up and grabbed his emergency suit. It was old and patched, just like his ship. But it was tough. It had saved his life more times than he could count. You stay here, he told Hana. Keep the engines hot. We might need to leave fast. You are going in alone? The corridors are narrow. 2 people will just slow things down. Hana wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She handed him a medical kit and a fire suppression tool. Do not die in there, she said. Do-hyun nodded and stepped through the airlock. The heat hit him immediately. Even through his suit, he could feel it pressing against his skin. The cargo bay was full of smoke. He could barely see 3 meters ahead, but he moved forward anyway, following the layout he had memorized from their scans. The starborn crown was a maze of elegant corridors and beautiful chambers. Everything was designed to show off the wealth and power of the Aethel Empire. But now that beauty was melting, gold decorations dripped from the walls. Crystal chandeliers crashed to the floor. Paintings of ancient emperors burned like firewood. Do-hyun pushed through it all. He found his first survivors in a side corridor. 3 Aethel crew members trapped behind a collapsed beam. They were coughing, struggling to breathe in the smoke. When they saw Do-hyun approaching, their silver faces showed something he did not expect: fear. They were afraid of him. It is okay, he said, keeping his voice calm. I am here to help. They did not move. They just stared at him like he was some kind of monster. Do-hyun did not have time to wonder why. He grabbed the beam and lifted. It was heavy. Far heavier than anything a human should be able to move. But adrenaline was a powerful thing. And Do-hyun had spent years training his body to do what should not be possible. His muscles screamed. His back felt like it was tearing apart. But he lifted that beam high enough for the crew members to crawl out. Then he dropped it and kept moving. He found more survivors as he went deeper into the ship. Some were injured, some were just lost. And all of them were terrified. Not of the fire, but of him. They had never seen a human before. They had only heard the stories, and now here was one, walking through flames like they were nothing, lifting impossible weights, refusing to stop even when his suit was smoking and his helmet was cracked. Finally, Do-hyun reached the throne room. It was a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. Even now, even burning, it was impressive. Tall pillars held up a domed ceiling painted with stars. A golden throne sat on a raised platform, and standing in front of that throne was the most beautiful being Do-hyun had ever seen. Princess Valora was tall and slender, with silver skin that seemed to glow even in the smoke-filled air. Her eyes were like liquid starlight. Her white hair flowed down her back like a frozen waterfall. She wore robes of deep blue that somehow remained perfect despite the chaos around her. Behind her stood a group of guards, their weapons raised. And beside her was an aethel male, with cold eyes, and an expression of pure disgust. Lord Kalos stepped forward, blocking Do-hyun's path. "You dare enter the presence of the princess, human?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Know your place. Creatures like you should not even be allowed to look upon aethel royalty." Do-hyun did not flinch. He did not get angry. He simply looked past Kalos, directly at the princess. "Your Highness," he said, his accent thick but his words clear. "Your ship has about 4 minutes before the engine core explodes. I suggest we move." Kalos raised his weapon. "You will address her through me. If you address her at all, I am Lord Kalos of the High Command. I have destroyed entire fleets. I will not be spoken to by some primitive ape from a backwater planet." Do-hyun finally looked at him. Just looked. His dark eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made Kalos hesitate. Something old and dangerous. The look of a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the effort. 3 minutes 50 seconds, Do-hyun said. Princess Valora had been silent through all of this. She had watched this human walk into her throne room, covered in burns and blood. She had watched him face down Kalos without fear. She had watched him and realized that everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. This creature was not primitive. This creature was not weak. This creature had walked through fire to reach her, and he was not even breathing hard. "Lower your weapon," she commanded Kalos. "Your Highness, you cannot seriously be considering." "I said lower it." Her voice was like ice. Kalos obeyed, though his face twisted with humiliation. Valora stepped forward, approaching the human. Up close, she could see the damage he had taken. His suit was burned in a dozen places. Blood ran from a gash on his forehead, dripping down into his eye. He must have been in agony, but his hands were steady. His eyes were focused. "You came through all that fire alone," she said softly. "Why?" Do-hyun tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. "You were in trouble," he said simply. "That is enough reason." Valora felt something shift inside her. A crack in the walls she had built around her heart. "Then lead the way, Captain." Do-hyun nodded once. Then he turned and walked back into the flames, trusting that she would follow, and she did. Princess Valora had never run in her life. Not once. Running was for servants, for soldiers, for common people who had places to be and no dignity to maintain. Royalty walked. Royalty glided. Royalty moved with grace and purpose. Never rushing. Never sweating. Never appearing anything less than perfectly composed. But now she was running. The human captain moved through the burning corridors like he had been born in fire. He did not hesitate at intersections. He did not slow down when flames blocked his path. He simply pushed through, finding gaps in the inferno that Valora would never have seen on her own. Behind them came the others. Kalos was there, his handsome face twisted with fear he was trying to hide. Captain Soren and 3 of his guards followed close, their weapons drawn even though there was nothing to shoot. And at the back were a handful of crew members who had joined them along the way. The smoke was getting thicker. Valora could barely breathe. Her lungs burned with every inhale. Her eyes watered so badly that she could hardly see. But every time she stumbled, a hand caught her. Do-hyun's hand. He never let her fall. Not once. They turned a corner and found their path blocked. A section of the ceiling had collapsed, filling the corridor with twisted metal and sparking wires. Fire danced on the debris pile like a living thing. "We need another route," Soren said, looking around desperately. Do-hyun did not answer. He was already climbing the debris pile. testing handholds, finding a path through the chaos. Flames licked at his arms. His gloves were smoking. But he did not stop. "Follow exactly where I step," he called back. "The floor is weak on the left side. Stay right." He reached the top of the pile and started pulling pieces aside, creating a gap just big enough for people to squeeze through. Valora watched him work, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. He should not be able to do this. No Category 9 species should have this kind of strength, this kind of endurance. Their reports said humans were fragile. The reports were wrong. One by one, they climbed through. Do-hyun helped each person, pulling them up, steadying them, making sure they got through safely. When it was Valora's turn, he offered his hand without a word. She took it. His grip was strong and warm, even through his burned gloves. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, guiding her over the worst of the debris. For just a moment, their eyes met. His were dark brown, almost black, and filled with a calm certainty that made her feel safe. "Almost there," he said. They kept moving. The next corridor was clearer, but there was a problem. Two of Soren's guards had been injured by falling debris. One had a broken leg, the other had burns covering half his body. They could barely walk, let alone run. "Leave them," Kalos said immediately. "They will only slow us down." Soren turned on him, fury in his silver eyes. "These are my men. I will not abandon them. Then we all die. Is that what you want? The princess must survive. Nothing else matters." Valora opened her mouth to speak, but Do-hyun was already moving. He walked past Kalos without a glance and knelt beside the wounded guards. "Can you put your arm around my shoulder?" he asked the one with the broken leg. The guard stared at him in confusion. "What? Your arm?" "Around my shoulder. I will carry you. That is, you cannot possibly." But Do-hyun was already lifting him. He got the first guard settled on his back, then turned to the second one. This one was heavier and badly burned, but Do-hyun managed to support him under one arm. He was now carrying two grown Aethel warriors. Each one was taller and heavier than him. Together, they must have weighed 3 times what he did. He started walking. "This is impossible," one of the crew members whispered. "How is he doing this?" Valora did not have an answer. She just watched as this human, this supposedly primitive creature, carried her wounded soldiers through a burning ship like it was nothing, like it was just something that needed to be done. They reached the cargo bay where the Dandelion was docked. The airlock was holding, but barely. Valora could see the little human ship through the smoke, ugly and battered, and the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. A woman appeared in the airlock. She had the same dark hair and brown eyes as the captain. She looked at the group, then at Do-hyun carrying the 2 guards, and something passed between them, a silent conversation that needed no words. "Get them on board," she said. "I have medical supplies ready." They started loading people through the airlock. It was slow work. The seal was unstable, and they could only move a few people at a time. Valora counted heads as they went. The princess, Kalos, Soren, 3 guards, 4 crew members. "Wait," she said suddenly. "Where is Ensign Mora?" "She was with us when we left the throne room." Everyone looked around. The young ensign was gone. She must have gotten separated in the smoke. "We cannot wait," Kalos said. "The ship will explode any moment." "She is one of my people," Valora said. "I will not leave her." "Then send the guards. You must get to safety." But the guards were injured or exhausted. Soren looked ready to collapse. There was only one person still standing who looked capable of going back. Do-hyun handed his medical kit to the woman in the airlock. "Keep loading them," he said. "I will be back." "Do-hyun, no." Her voice was sharp with fear. "You have maybe 2 minutes before this whole ship goes up. Then I better be fast." He turned and ran back into the fire. Valora watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to call out to him, to tell him to stop, to stay safe. But the words would not come. All she could do was wait. The seconds crawled by like hours. The ship groaned and shuddered around them. More debris fell from the ceiling. The smoke got thicker. The heat more intense. Through the airlock, Valora could see Hana working frantically at the controls, keeping the seal intact through sheer force of will. 1 minute passed. Then another. "He is not coming back," Kalos said quietly. "We need to go." "No." Valora's voice was firm. "We wait. Your Highness, please. Your life is more important than—" I said we wait. And then, through the smoke, a figure appeared. Do-hyun was carrying Ensign Mora over his shoulder. The young woman was unconscious, her silver skin gray with smoke. And Do-hyun? Do-hyun looked like death walking. His suit was in ruins. His face was covered in blood and burns. He was limping badly, each step clearly causing him agony, but he was smiling. "Found her," he said. They loaded the last survivors and sealed the airlock. Hana was already at the controls, fingers flying over the panels. "Hold on to something," she shouted. The dandelion tore away from the starborn crown just as the engine core finally exploded. The blast wave hit them like a giant's fist, sending the little ship spinning through space. Valora was thrown against the wall, then the floor, then the wall again. Warning alarms screamed. Something was on fire somewhere. But then, slowly, the spinning stopped. The alarms quieted, and through the viewport, Valora could see the remains of her magnificent royal cruiser. There was nothing left but scattered atoms and fading fire. Everything she had owned was gone. Her clothes, her jewelry, her personal belongings, 1,000 years of family heirlooms. All of it. Destroyed in an instant. But she was alive. She looked across the crowded little cargo hold of the dandelion. Her people were alive. Injured, scared, and covered in soot. But alive. Because one human had decided that their lives were worth risking his own. Do-hyun was sitting against the wall, eyes closed, breathing hard. Blood was still dripping from his forehead. His burned hands were shaking. He looked half dead. Valora walked over to him and knelt down. "You went back," she said softly. "For a single ensign you had never met. For soldiers who pointed weapons at you." "Why?" Do-hyun opened his eyes. Despite everything, there was still that strange calm in them. That quiet strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. "They were hurt," he said simply. "That is all that matters." Valora felt tears building in her eyes. She blinked them away, but they kept coming. She had been taught her whole life that humans were nothing. Less than nothing. And yet this human had just taught her more about honor and courage than 300 years of royal education. "I do not even know how to thank you," she whispered. Do-hyun shrugged, which made him wince in pain. "Do not thank me yet. We still have a 6-day journey to the nearest Aethel outpost." He paused. "And our shower is broken." Despite everything, Valora laughed. It was a small laugh. Almost a sob. But it was real. For the first time in her life, Princess Valora of the Aethel Empire did not know what to believe anymore. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something new. The dandelion was cramped. It had been designed for a crew of 2, not a crew of 2 plus 10 Aethel survivors. Every corner of the ship was filled with people. The cargo hold had become a sleeping area. The tiny kitchen was working overtime. The single bathroom had a line that never seemed to end. But somehow, they made it work. Valora found herself spending most of her time in the cockpit, watching the stars pass by through the viewport. It was quieter there, away from Kalos and his constant complaints, away from the whispered conversations of her people who did not know what to make of their human rescuers. On the second day, Hana found her there. The human woman was younger than Do-hyun, with a quicker smile and sharper tongue. She moved through the cramped ship like she owned every inch of it, which Valora supposed she did. In her hands, she carried 2 cups of something hot and dark. "Coffee," she said, offering one to Valora. "It is a human drink. Might taste strange to you, but it helps with tiredness." Valora took the cup carefully. The smell was bitter and earthy, unlike anything she had encountered before. She took a small sip and almost coughed. Hana laughed. Yeah, that is the normal reaction. Give it time. It grows on you. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Outside the viewport, a nebula drifted past, all purple and gold against the darkness of space. Can I ask you something? Valora said finally. Sure. The galactic reports say that humans are primitive. Category 9. Weak, short-lived, unremarkable. But what I saw on my ship, that was not weak. How did Do-hyun do those things? How did he walk through fire? How did he carry my guards like they weighed nothing? Hana set down her coffee cup and thought for a moment. You know what makes humans different from most species? She said. It is not our technology. It is not our intelligence. It is the fact that we should not exist at all. Valora frowned. What do you mean? Earth is a death world. Do you know what that means? The term was familiar, but only vaguely. Death worlds were planets with extreme conditions. Places where life should not be able to survive. They were rare, and usually uninhabited. Your planet is a death world? Hana nodded. Extreme temperatures, natural disasters, predators, diseases. Poison everywhere. Our own sun gives us cancer. Our water can kill us if we drink too much or too little. The air can freeze our lungs in some places and burn them in others. Every single day on Earth is a fight for survival. She leaned back in her chair, a strange pride in her eyes. And we won. Not by being stronger or faster or smarter than our environment. We won by being too stubborn to die. We won by adapting, by refusing to give up, by pushing through pain that should have killed us. Valora thought about this. She had never considered that a species could be shaped by hardship rather than comfort. The Aethel had evolved on a gentle world with mild seasons and abundant resources. They had never needed to fight for survival. The fire on your ship, Hana continued. That was nothing compared to what humans have survived. We have people who have fallen from aircraft without parachutes and lived. We have people who have been lost in frozen wastelands for weeks and walked out. We have people who have been shot, stabbed, burned, and broken, and just kept going. That sounds impossible. It is impossible, until you do it. Hana smiled. We have a saying on Earth. The human body can stand almost anything. It is the human mind you have to convince. Do-hyun was a SEAL before he became a freighter captain. Navy SEALs are special soldiers trained to do things that should not be possible. They break them down until nothing is left. Then build them back up stronger. And Valora thought about Do-hyun carrying her wounded guards, his body failing but his will unbreakable. She thought about him going back into the fire for a single ensign he had never met. Why? She asked. Why do humans do these things? Risk their lives for strangers? This time, Hana took longer to answer. Because we know how short life is, she said quietly. We only get maybe 80, 90 years if we are lucky. That is nothing compared to species like yours. So every life matters. Every moment matters. If we can save someone, we do. If we can help someone, we do. Because we know that time is running out for all of us. The words hit Valora like a physical blow. She had always thought of human lifespans as a weakness. They lived such short lives. What could they possibly accomplish? But now, she saw it differently. Their short lives made them value life more. Their constant awareness of death made them braver in the face of it. They were not weak because they died young. They were strong because they knew they would die, and they lived anyway. That night, Valora could not sleep. She walked through the cramped corridors of the Dandelion until she found Do-hyun in the cargo hold. He was lying on a thin mat, his injuries bandaged, staring at the ceiling. Cannot sleep either? He asked. Valora sat down beside him. I keep thinking about what Hana told me. About Earth. About humans. Do-hyun made a small sound of acknowledgement. We learned about your species in my education, Valora said. We were taught that you were primitive. Barely worth noticing. The lowest category. I know, but that is not true, is it? The ranking system, the categories. It was all a lie. Do-hyun turned his head to look at her. In the dim light of the cargo hold, his dark eyes were unreadable. "Your empire has been around for 100,000 years," he said. "Ours has barely been in space for 300. By your standards, we are children. Infants, even. But you know what infants do?" Valora shook her head. "They grow. They learn. They change." He looked back at the ceiling. "Your species reached its peak long ago. You have been the same for thousands of years. Stable, comfortable. But humans, we are still becoming. Every generation is different from the last. Stronger, smarter, more adaptable. We do not know our limits because we have not found them yet." Something Hana had said earlier came back to Valora. A conversation she had overheard between the two humans when they thought no one was listening. "The old empires knew," Hana had said. "That is why they created the ranking system. Not to measure species. To hide us. To keep everyone from looking too closely." "Hide you from what?" Valora asked now. Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. "There are old records," he said finally. "From before the Galactic Council existed. Stories about a species so dangerous that the ancient empires made a pact to leave them alone. To let them think they were unimportant. To let them stay on their little blue planet and never realize what they could become." Valora felt a chill run down her spine. "Humans." Do-hyun nodded slowly. "We were not ranked Category 9 because we were weak," he said. "We were ranked Category 9. So no one would take us seriously. So no one would see us as a threat until it was too late." The implications of this were staggering. The entire galactic ranking system, the foundation of how species interacted with each other, was designed to hide humanity, to keep them small and unnoticed while the galaxy moved on around them. But humans had left Earth anyway. They had built ships, explored space, and started spreading across the stars. And every day, more of them were learning what they were truly capable of. "What happens when everyone figures it out?" Valora whispered. "What happens when the galaxy realizes the truth?" Do-hyun smiled, just slightly. "I guess we will find out." Outside the viewport, the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere among them was Earth, a small blue planet that had produced a species the universe had tried to forget. But you cannot forget something that refuses to be forgotten, and humans had a habit of making themselves impossible to ignore. The Aethel Imperial Station was one of the largest structures in the known galaxy. It hung in space like a silver flower, its petals stretching out for hundreds of kilometers. Millions of people lived within its walls. Thousands of ships came and went every day. It was a symbol of Aethel power, Aethel wealth, and Aethel superiority. When the dandelion appeared on their sensors, the station did not know what to make of it. "What is that thing?" the docking controller asked, staring at his screen. "It looks like a piece of space debris." His colleague leaned over to look. "It is a human freighter. Must have wandered off course. Tell it to leave." "Wait." The first controller held up his hand. "It is sending the princess's emergency codes." "Wait. Wait. Wait." Silence fell over the control room. The princess's emergency codes were only used in the most desperate situations. They had not been activated in over a century. Within minutes, the news had spread across the entire station. The princess was alive. She was coming home. And she was aboard a human ship. Lord Kalos had sent transmissions ahead, of course. He had explained what happened in careful, edited terms. The starborn crown had suffered an accident. The princess had been evacuated. A human vessel had provided transportation. He made it sound routine, unremarkable, barely worth mentioning, but rumors were already spreading. Elder Thane heard them first. He was ancient even by Aethel standards, over 2,000 years old. His silver skin had faded to a dull gray, and his once bright eyes were clouded with age. But his mind was sharp, and his memory was longer than anyone else alive. He remembered the old stories. When the dandelion finally docked, almost the entire court had assembled to greet the princess. They filled the grand reception hall. Hundreds of nobles and officials in their finest robes, all waiting to see their future empress return safely. The great doors opened. Kang Do-hyun walked in first. He had refused all offers of new clothing. He wore the same suit he had worn on the rescue, still burned and torn and stained with blood. His face still bore the marks of his injuries. He looked like he had walked through a war and come out the other side. Because he had. Behind him walked Yoon-hana, her head held high, her eyes meeting the stares of the Aethel nobles without flinching. She was shorter than everyone in the room, weaker than everyone in the room, and absolutely unafraid. The court went silent. This was not what they had expected. The reports said humans were primitive, cowering creatures, barely sentient enough to communicate. But these two walked like warriors. They walked like they belonged here. They walked like they owned every room they entered. Lord Kalos stepped forward quickly, positioning himself between the humans and the crowd. "The princess is safe, as you can see," he announced loudly. "These humans provided transportation after the unfortunate accident with the Starborn crown. They have been adequately compensated and will be leaving shortly." No one was looking at him. Everyone was looking at the humans. One of the nobles, a young lord who had never seen a human before, leaned toward his companion. "They are so small," he whispered. "How can anything that small survive in space?" "I heard they breathe poison," another noble said. "The oxygen in their air is flammable. They evolved breathing fire. Look at their eyes, so dark. Like black holes." The whispers spread through the hall like ripples on water. But they stopped when Princess Valora appeared. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step measured and graceful. She wore simple robes borrowed from the Dandelion's emergency supplies. Nothing like her usual royal finery. Her ceremonial tiara sat on her head, the only thing of value she had left. But somehow, she had never looked more like a queen. She paused at the top of the steps leading down to the reception hall. Her eyes swept across the crowd, taking in the faces of her nobles, her advisors, her people. Then she looked at the humans. Something passed between her and Do-hyun. A silent understanding. An acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. Valora descended the steps. The crowd parted before her, creating a path straight to where the humans stood. Kalos tried to intercept her, but she walked past him like he was not there. She moved with purpose, with intention, with the absolute certainty of someone who had finally seen the truth. She stopped in front of Kang Do-hyun. The silence in the hall was complete. No one breathed. No one moved. Every eye was fixed on the princess and the human. Valora studied his face for a long moment. This ordinary-looking creature from a forgotten planet. This Category 9 species that everyone had dismissed as worthless. This man, who had walked through fire for her. She opened her mouth to speak, and her tiara slipped from her head. It fell slowly, almost gracefully, tumbling end over end, until it hit the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. No one moved to pick it up, not even Valora. She just stood there, looking at Do-hyun with tears forming in her starlight eyes. "Captain Kang Do-hyun," she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "The Aethel Empire owes you a debt that cannot be measured." Do-hyun did not bow. He did not look away. He met her gaze as an equal, not as a subject. "Just doing what humans do, Your Highness." Behind him, Hana muttered something under her breath. It was not quite quiet enough to go unheard. "Showing off is what we do." A laugh escaped Valora before she could stop it. It was bright and real and completely inappropriate for the situation. But she did not care. She had spent 300 years being appropriate. She had spent 300 years believing lies. She turned to face her court. "What you have been told about humans is wrong," she announced. "What the Galactic Council says about them is wrong. The ranking system, the categories, all of it. I have seen the truth with my own eyes." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. Kalos stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "Your Highness, you are clearly exhausted from your ordeal. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. You will be silent." The words cut through the air like a blade. Kalos froze. his mouth still open. Valora continued. This man walked through fire to save me. He carried my wounded soldiers on his back. He went back into a burning ship for a single ensign he had never met. Not for reward, not for glory, not for political advantage. He did it because they needed help, and he could help them. She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of her nobles, one by one. When was the last time any of you did something like that? When was the last time any Aethel risked their life for a stranger from another species? Silence. That is what I thought. Valora bent down and picked up her tiara. She looked at it for a moment. This symbol of her power and position. This circle of precious metal that was supposed to mean everything. Then she walked over to where Do-hyun stood and placed it in his hands. The court gasped. Kalos made a strangled sound of horror. Even Hana looked surprised. I cannot repay what you did for me, Valora said quietly, for his ears alone. But I can make sure the galaxy knows the truth about humanity. I can make sure no one ever dismisses your species again. Only, Do-hyun looked at the tiara, then back at her. Keep it, he said, pressing it back into her hands. You are going to need it. For what? He smiled. Just slightly. For changing things. In the back of the hall, Elder Thane watched everything unfold. His old hands trembled as he remembered the ancient texts, the forbidden histories, the warnings that had been buried for thousands of years. The old empires had hidden humanity for a reason. They had kept them small and unnoticed because they knew what would happen if humans ever reached their potential. They knew that once humans started rising, nothing in the galaxy would be able to stop them. And now the princess had made them visible. Now the whole empire would learn about the human who walked through fire. Now everything would change. Thane turned and walked slowly out of the hall. He had work to do. Old files to access. Ancient warnings to reread. Because if the prophecies were true, if the hidden histories were accurate, then the galaxy was about to enter a new age. The age of humanity. And the universe was not ready for what that meant. Back in the reception hall, Princess Valora placed her tiara back on her head. But it felt different now. Lighter. Less like a burden, and more like a promise. She looked at Do-hyun and Hana, these two ordinary humans who had turned her world upside down. Will you stay? She asked. As honored guests of the Empire? Do-hyun glanced at Hana. She shrugged. We have freight to deliver, Do-hyun said. Schedules to keep. The galaxy does not wait for anyone, not even heroes. He turned to leave, then paused. But maybe we will pass through again someday. If you ever need another rescue. Valora smiled. It was the first real smile she had given in years. I will hold you to that, Captain. The two humans walked out of the grand hall, past the staring nobles, and the shocked officials, and the ancient elder who watched them with knowing eyes. They returned to their battered little ship, their ugly little home that had carried them through fire and war and the depths of space. And as the dandelion lifted off and headed back into the stars, Princess Valora stood at the viewport of the Imperial Station, watching them go. Somewhere in the galaxy, everything was about to change. And it had all started with a human who walked through fire.